everyone, and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
You may remember from last week's episode that in the middle of my pitch, in which I was pitching a game about kind of a linguistic explorer who goes around and tries to interpret what are ostensibly nonsense languages and plugging in recognized words into kind of create and decode the entire hierarchy of a language, that I thought, I have Heaven's Vault installed. And gosh, doesn't this sound so familiar? I should probably play that and make sure that's not the exact same thing that I did just pitch. And in the time since the last recording, I have played it, and it is the exact same thing that I just pitched.
Well, that, and this is, of course, the gift and the curse of recording beforehand, but we pitched another game last week, which was games smashing together. I think it was Matt. Was it a Matt who wrote in with us?
Yeah.
Sure enough, almost like clockwork, Nintendo literally 2 days later came out with the indie showcase, where they showcased a developer making a game where you run a game store and can smash two games together, or at least different elements of different games. So lo and behold, I guess it's a compliment, right? I mean, the ideas must be kind of sound if someone else thought of it.
That's right.
Now they just have to make money, right?
Or we could just be subconsciously stealing stuff. That's not our intention. Although today I am very excited to talk about my idea of a rapping puppy who is trained by a crotchety old onion to fight, but we'll get to that.
That sounds amazing.
So anyways, if you liked last week's Playwright, then we encourage you to check out both Heaven's Vault, which is available on Steam and likely other storefronts. It's an interesting game from the creators of 80 Days, and so it's got at least the writing going for it. And Super Mash, which will be available next March on Nintendo Switch, or available right now as a timed exclusive on the Epic Game Store on PC. So there you go. That's us coming clean, I suppose.
Although with our luck, honestly, you say Epic timed exclusive, it won't be timed exclusive anymore by the time someone gets around to hearing this episode. So, it is what it is, as they say.
Just stack the lies on top of each other. Keep them coming, baby.
That's right. We're a show about deceit.
Let's get right to the game pitch and see if we can't outdo ourselves this time.
Am I going first this week?
Yes, you're going to be pitching first. So what do you have for us?
Okay, so this one is maybe deceptively simple, but I want to pitch to you some combination between a Mario auto-scroller type of level and something like a Terraria or SteamWorld Dig. So the screen is moving from left to right, or right to left, I guess, depending on how you think of it. You're moving from left to right across different levels. But as opposed to giant platforming challenges, what you're really doing is a series of digging and climbing and defeating enemies along the way.
All right. We'll go ahead and start the clock then. You mentioned SteamWorld Dig as one of the reference points here, and one of the things that I am most interested in that game is that you're kind of creating your own platform challenges as you're tunneling downwards, which is the direction you want to go. If you're digging for more and more valuable materials, which will be farther and farther away from the surface, you're going downwards. The easiest way to do that is to go straight down in most cases, but you're also creating your platforming route back to the surface in doing so, because you do have to resurface every once in a while, and so you kind of have to jump up the blocks that you left behind that you didn't tunnel through previously. So in a situation where you're just going in one direction, how do we make that as interesting as the kind of risk-reward lineup that you get with SteamWorld Dig?
So one of the things I think that we could do to keep this interesting, number one is, I don't know about you, but I play SteamWorld in when I'm initially digging down, it's a little slower and it's a little bit more plodding. Mm-hmm. But if I am constantly being asked to push forward, not only will digging sort of horizontally have to be kind of taken into account. But the idea of having enemies and stuff, and like the way SteamWorld will have certain enemies that kind of break out of tiles, I think you can try and optimize routes by avoiding enemies, but you also have the choice of like taking combat head on. So it's almost like a combat challenge rather, just as much as potentially a platforming challenge.
Maybe your ability to drill through the ground to stay ahead of the ever-encroaching boundaries of the screen is kind of a limited resource that you can recharge by defeating enemies or something like that. But maybe enemies slow you down, or maybe there's some sort of a health counter. One of the games I was really interested in on the 3DS, because back in the day, I in my first job at Nintendo, part of my research role, we made heavy use of Miiverse monitoring on both the Wii U and the 3DS, because there was kind of a wealth of data that people were offering up. And so, what better way to learn about our audience than to go into the place where they have self-selected to post their own thoughts and opinions about the games that have been released. And there was a game that caught my eye called Fairune 2, because of the screenshots that were posted, there were some really clever puzzles and solutions and stuff in there. And so I always had this in the back of my mind, like Fairune 2 is a undiscovered masterpiece that nobody knows about. And it's one of those like hipster games in like 10 years, you can kind of like look cool by bringing it up at a party or something like that.
Okay, so wait a minute. Let me write it down here. F-E-R.
That's, if anyone's interested, that is Fairune 2 without a space. But you can find it in the Fairune collection on Nintendo Switch if you don't want to go back to the 3DS. But anyways, cool. The whole reason I bring this up is because it had an interesting mechanic where it's kind of a top-down Zelda-like game. There are enemies on this overworld that are hopping around, and you fight them by basically just jumping into them. There's no attack, there's no dodge, there's no blocking or anything. It's just kind of like you bash into them, and they do their amount of power against your health. You do your amount of power against their health. And it's just kind of an automatic process of, it's very kind of like D&D in a way, but without the dice. It's very predictable. But I just thought like, it's such like a honest, straightforward way to present a combat system. I was just like that, just bumping up against something, watching it explode and watching your health count down and knowing like, okay, with this amount of health left, I can't take out that enemy, but I could get through that one. And it's kind of an interesting balance it struck.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, because I do think that like this, because it's trying to set a tone and a pace, there's going to be more on this game in terms of the demand for engaging directly with combat. It's going to have to be a little bit more Mario-esque in its enemy placement. But I like the idea, and sometimes you get this with certain sections of Mario levels where there's almost like a giant dense block or dense section of those sort of I don't want to call them translucent, but the typical Mario blocks that when you hit them, you can pass through them for a short amount of time as they're flipping. It could be interesting to use, if you have a drill or something a la SteamWorld, a limited fuel resource or something where you're forced to kind of live or play at the level that you've dug yourself, kind of digging your own grave in a sense, for some period of time. So if you go down and you run out of fuel, you're forced to engage in combat to sort of refill that fuel. There's
a couple of games that I feel we'd be a little kind of sloppy to not mention, at least. There is, and I always get these mixed up, there's Dig Dug, which is all about digging, but there's no scrolling screen. It's just about digging, fighting enemies underground in a very kind of side-on arcade format, kind of freely going in a grid-based directions and exploding enemies along the way. And then there is Mr. Driller, which I think actually fits this pretty closely. It is a vertically scrolling game instead of a horizontally one. And it's kind of like a falling block puzzle in a way, where
that's interesting.
There's kind of clumps of earth that you're digging into that are that take up different squares of. They can form rectangles, they can form bigger squares, they can form small squares, and as you dig through them, I believe gravity affects the ones that are no longer supported above you, and they can come down and crush you. And so you're trying to kind of like dig as far down as you can, while still keeping yourself from falling victim to falling blocks in that case.
So in this scenario, we do potentially the auto scroll, but you're moving top to bottom. And so the pressure, it's almost like a falling chase scene, if you will. I'm thinking it has to be slower than something like Downwell, but I do like the idea of digging through certain sections and maybe hitting checkpoints where you free fall, and you're kind of landing in a new part of the screen, a new part of the mine that you're digging down. So like a Downwell punctuated with a little bit less chaotic sections where you're kind of frantically digging and encountering enemies.
Another reference point that is hot off the presses is actually just released today at the time of recording, which is quite a few weeks before this ends up going out. And so, we're going to be behind the times at that point. But, just back here in 2019, just today released the Shovel Knight King of Cards expansion, which is the final Shovel Knight expansion for the Treasure Trove collection anyways. The King of Cards, or King Knight, has a really interesting control method where his attack is kind of like a shoulder bash, and then as soon as you bash up against a wall, he does this kind of like spin in the air, and at that point you can drop on enemies and hurt them and attack them, but you can also do this kind of like drill through blocks, which is kind of fun, but you have to bash against the wall to get that drill started. You can't just go from a jump to the drill. And so you always have to kind of balance, like, I need something to bounce off of to get to where I need to be. I don't want to destroy the thing that I'm bouncing off of. I can only bounce off of some surfaces. So, I just played a little bit today just to capture some audio, but it was interesting to kind of wrap my head around that different control scheme.
So that's it. Well, first of all, I'm glad you reminded me that came out today, because now I have an order of 3-pack of Amiibo that I need to cancel. That's definitely going to 2 houses ago. I think I ordered it. So, oh, Jesus. But yeah, I think that's cool. So now you're into a situation where you're moving through, you're having moments where you're sort of punctuating it with this combat section, and now you can unlock, like, every time you get into one of those new sections, potentially you do the Downwell thing where if you can make it off the screen, like to the left or to the right, occasionally there is that Spelunky-esque shop or secret area where you get little power-ups and stuff, and that kind of gives you a new lease on life in the next section of the digging.
Well, I hate to do this, but we're out of time. I feel like I spent the entire time talking about indie games and arcade classics. I don't know how much help that really was.
That's all right. That's all right. I loved it.
I guess whatever we have, let's give it a name.
Well, if we want to make it a Steam World game, are you ready? Is it too much to combine Downwell and Steam World and call it Steam World Down?
That's a bit cheeky. I was also thinking of if you're drilling a well, then that could be a new well, and maybe your character could be named Newell or something like that.
Drill Newell.
It's
just so stupid it could work.
Could just be Gabe Newell. This just happens to be his name.
Drill Newell. He'll drill your wallet for all the cash it has.
I like that. Drill Newell. That's a cute character name. That's fun.
Please write in with the next entry in the Drill Newell saga. It's been a while since I've talked about Wiggle and Joe, so I feel like feel like we need a new saga on the show.
That's right. Got to get those recurring characters back on the show again.
Right.
All right. My turn today. So I'm going to be pitching a game where you're managing invasive species as kind of like a puzzle game. introduce species to a different habitat across the galaxy, essentially, to manage life, but don't let it go out of control. You know, you might want to run certain things into extinction. You might want to alter the, I want to say the food pyramid, the food chain in certain ways.
Okay.
I am nervously eyeing the Epic Game Store and Journey to the Savage Planet, but I think I've watched the trailer and I think we're clear on this one. So let's call this an original idea and operate off of that assumption until we are corrected. So I'm going to go and start the clock.
Talk to me a little bit about how this thing feels mechanically, because I mean, I feel like there's some setup here, but I'm not quite sure how it plays.
To perhaps invalidate my last joking point there, there was a game that I played when I was really young called, I believe it's Sim Life. I was at that age where like all of these sim games that were coming out, and there were like a ton back in the day. They were like the like farming simulator and railroad simulator like of the day in how prolific the Sim series was.
Yeah.
Before they decided that like, oh, actually The Sims is going to make all the money in the world, so we don't have to do this anymore.
Right. We don't have to keep shooting in the dark.
Yeah. There was like Sim Ant and Sim Earth and Sim, the one that I was thinking of was Sim Life, where basically I was a very stupid child, and so all that I really knew or cared how to do was to draw funny little animals and plant them on different continents and watch them like grow and change and stuff. And it's just like, oh, you know, it's kind of a proto-spore, but with just like hand-drawn little character sprites and stuff that you could like edit within the little editor there. So I feel like it was probably doing similar things of watching species kind of feast on each other, become more prevalent in a space, and you having to kind of like place other species to manage those, kind of old lady who swallowed a fly style. But I'm interested in exploring that further and seeing if there's other cool ways we can take this.
Well, I love the idea, you know, we've talked about so many times in this show, like the idea of using DNA or an environment to shape life on a planet. So I wonder if there's like a Viva Pinata slant to this, where you can do some terraforming and either like create or attract different types of life forms in order to sort of cross-populate and create new species.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that Spore played with in a way. But I think that one was a little bit more hands-on, where you can choose the aspects of species that you consumed or mated with or whatever to enhance your own species.
Yeah.
But I think it would be kind of a different and fun experience to be removed from it in a god kind of way, you know, where you're just kind of like subtly guiding the evolutions of things, but you're not making those specific choices. You're just kind of like putting things together and seeing what happens, you know?
There's something about this that could almost be nostalgic in a way. And what I mean by that is, I know that there's, I don't know how many years of a gap there is between you and I, but when I was young, I had a Tamagotchi pet. And one of the things that mobile games have played with, certainly because it's kind of on you all the time, and maybe this works as a mobile game, is the idea of every once in a while you have to tend to your flock, right? Or you have to tend to your creature. So maybe if this is that sort of sim life, interface or whatever, you have kind of a map and you see certain areas of the map need rain, or they need weather, they need some sort of interaction. That's your gentle hand. You kind of slowly guide the climate and the ecology in order to support, and you see, species migrate, and you find some are developing a pack of predators, so obviously they need food, so maybe you create storms and get another pack of prey to migrate into where the predators are and that sort of stuff. No microtransactions, that is. Yeah,
so I like that you're more kind of managing the environment and watching species kind of naturally evolve out of that. I think that's a cool idea. I guess also if you could just like pick up and move like individual members of a species, and you can kind of choose at that point, like if one species is getting out of hand, you can move a predator over there to kind of thin the herd a little bit. You can move a pair of predators so that they can start, reproducing as well as they just kind of replace the awful species you're trying to control at that point. So, it could be interesting too. And then, of course, all of the I just want this all to tie back to all the stories you hear about invasive species in nature, where something is introduced either intentionally or unintentionally into a habitat in which it wasn't, in which it didn't evolve, and the entire habitat basically goes kind of tits up because it doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting to see. So at first, maybe you're generally guiding things like the weather, and maybe you have that sort of black and white-esque hand that can kind of pick up creatures and put them in different locations depending on the scale you're dealing with. But yeah, when you drop in a species, you're almost like it's the equivalent of, turning on the whirlpool in a fish tank or something. Not that, where you're just like, I just want to see what happens. So it's kind of servicing both the player who's interested in like just having the fish tank and the player who's interested in like poking the universe.
Yeah. So let's talk about the time scale here, because of course things evolving over time is a hugely lengthy process. So, how quickly do we want things to happen? How quickly do we want species to change versus the kind of day-to-day of things being eaten and replaced?
Maybe you'd have to be able to potentially have the Sims like 3 playback speeds, so you can kind of slow down into the micro view, and maybe some players would play entirely in the nice slow. Like you see the Sims players who are just way more interested in just kind of living the day-to-day of it, and then the people who are just like, mega time scale, get that job, get that money so I can design this house. So maybe it's also like guiding certain types of species in a spore-like way ends up adding them to your catalog, and you can kind of take them and place them in different spots. Maybe you find out like where they initially evolved from, they actually thrive in a different part of the world instead.
Are there environments that they're most accustomed to, or is it just the abundance of their needed prey around, whether it's animals or plants?
I think it could be the prey, potentially. But one of the things that's interesting, right, is it could just be animal X survive in climate Y. So you take one that's maybe more tropical, you drop it into the winter. And let's say in this, it's a chill game. So most animals can survive most climates. So you drop a few into a wintry climate from a tropical climate. And now you're in a scenario where you can watch them like grow thick fur and like get like tusks so that they're good at fishing in the ice and like breaking up, that sort of thing. So like that is how you're getting new species and kind of evolving them based on what they have access to eat and what their environment is.
All right. So all of this, we've talked about different types of animals. How would this change if we're managing birds and fish?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, what do birds eat? I guess birds eat fish. Is that the 1-to-1? Or do birds eat more than fish? They must just eat plants too, yeah? Some of them?
Like owls eat mice and stuff like that.
I'm thinking that it would be kind of interesting to maybe if you can't control the weather, you take away some level of control. Instead, you have to kind of label parts of the world yourself based on the behavior of the species that you see. So during certain times of year, you notice all the birds are flocking to a certain part of the map. So from that, you can sort of garner that is the more tropical climate or something like that. And now you're labeling it yourself, and you've carved out the map and you're managing where things go, rather than there being explicit affordances of like, oh, here's snow, like better use that. It's a little bit more blank slate.
Interesting. So we're at our 10 minutes. Let's close it down and come up with a name for this one.
Sim Life is pretty good. but it is taken.
I was thinking we could do, since everything, since, life is very kind of linear and serialized, we can call this Life Serial, but spelled with an S.
Life Serial is pretty good. I mean, it's as good as, what is his name? Drill Newman?
I wonder if that's a regional thing that people outside of the country are not going to understand.
Well, there's always the game of life.
That's true.
But no, I think Life Serial's good. And what I like about it is if you're up till 2 or 3 a.m., you'll actually find that Life Serial's spokesperson is Drill Newman, which is perfect.
That's right. Mikey likes it, and so does Drill Newman.
Drill
Newell. All right. Let's go to our community. We don't always take these pitches in order, and I feel kind of bad looking at the date on this one because it is about half a year old.
Oh no!
Sorry, we don't mean to ignore, but we eventually do get around to things. So this one comes from Andreas Lennartsson, who says, "Hey guys, this is my second pitch for the show. The first was Harry Potter plus LA Noire kind of game called Mischief Managed. I work as a teacher and was thinking if you could make a game that uses a child's imagination as a kind of mechanic. Imagine a Persona-ish game, but the supernatural or magic elements come in the form of things that the children's play. If you pretend to run a restaurant, that becomes a level. If you play hide and seek, that becomes a level. If you start a food war during lunch, that becomes a level. What do you think? Start the clock." I like that was a nice little sign off in the email there.
I know, that was easy. Thank you.
This is fun. This makes me think of a few things. Costume Quest by Double Fine, in which children are going around trick-or-treating, and then they're in a JRPG type setup. As they enter random encounter battles, whatever costume they were wearing turns into like a giant terrifying version of what they were wearing. So like somebody in a robot costume could turn into like a giant mech, and there's always kind of comical costumes in there. Somebody who goes as like an ear of corn could turn into like a huge corn cob monster. It's quite fun. And there's a game recently published by why can't I remember? Clay Entertainment. That's the one. This year, called Hot Lava, in which it's basically the floor is lava game that we've all played as we're hopping on furniture and trying to stay off the floor as we're getting from one part of the room to the other. But they actually do imagine all of the ground as like actual rendered lava. And that's just a kind of fun little, perversion of the environment in a way that seems true to the imagination of children.
Weirdly, we're talking about a game that I've played, Hot Lava. My buddy's son, who's this little 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid, he insisted that I play Hot Lava because I was, quote, good at video games, and it required a lot of positioning. I think that's fun, and I mean, if we kind of dig a little bit into what Andreas was saying here with like Persona, half the game being a little bit more of a silly thing or a silly life sim, but for a kid. So, in Persona, we're still going to class. I think that could still be here, but the class is, kindergarten. So you have access to all these tools and like scissors and crayons and paint and, your packed lunch that your mom made and your backpack and like all of these things and like a play place and all these things that a kid does. And so maybe like Fire Emblem-y, maybe this is also a Persona thing. You're choosing like 1 to 3 activities a day that you can do from a whole spate of activities. And depending on your choices and the cocktail of choices that dictates the more Costume Quest-like dungeon that happens at night.
Mm-hmm. So what genre are we envisioning this being? And let's find something surprising.
Shared world shooter.
Okay. Now, this is interesting, actually. If it's all based on the individual imagination, if everybody is seeing things a little bit differently, the same space, maybe the same enemies. Maybe it doesn't even affect anything. This reminds me of another game, and this is just me being an old man sitting on the porch telling war stories this entire episode. But I hope it's useful and interesting in a way. But in the Kane and Lynch games, which is, I don't remember which team made them. Is that a Squaresoft joint? I don't remember.
I think that may have been, who made Hitman?
Oh yeah, IO Interactive. That is the same team. Good job. Kane and Lynch, one of the characters is known to be like a kind of hallucinatory, psychotic or something like that. And he would see certain characters as enemies that were really friends or something like that. He would see things differently than the partner did in this kind of, not split screen, but online co-op game. And so, you'd just be kind of going along and all of a sudden you'd see your friends start shooting at like police officers and you'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Stop it. And that would just be his reality,
That's interesting. And I think the world of or the mechanics of the shared world shooter, the destinies of the world, if you will, would actually be really fun / comical if you applied them to, say, a kindergarten classroom, right? You make everyone the scale of a small kid, and it's almost like the social space inside of Destiny where people are running around and they're interacting with things and trade is happening. And so you could have like some period of time pre-dungeon or sort of combat where everybody's going and playing with different things. And then depending on all the tools that the group accessed, that could affect like essentially the loadout of the characters when they go into one of the kids' imaginations, and then it rotates for each kid.
What is the desired party size then? How many people are we wanting to either NPCs or human players to kind of buddy up?
That's a good question. I feel like for me, when I was little, it always felt like 3 was a really like centralized group of friends. Like there was always like me, a really good friend, and like the friend that they're vouching for, essentially. So maybe there's something to 3 that works.
Okay.
I also like the idea that like being captured or stopped by the teacher is the thing that ends the sort of pre-combat round. So like the more that all 3 friends can kind of disperse and keep the teacher running between them, the more off you are to get some more bonuses or something before the combat begins.
I do like that, especially if all of these different dungeons you could be delving into are essentially different imaginary constructs, and which gives each of them not only like a different aesthetic, like a Dead Cells type thing where all of these different areas kind of behave a little bit differently, but also a different visual language in a way. And so you kind of have to figure out, there are kind of equivalent enemies in each one. There are equivalent items and stuff, but they all look different because they're all being generated by somebody else's imagination. So there's a certain kind of centralized game language you learn playing the entire game. And then you kind of have to relearn the language with each new level that you join, because everything just looks and behaves a little bit differently.
That's interesting. So now you have mechanics. You could even add in a layer where before, at the end of the school day or whatever, once the teacher rounds up all the kids, you go over one of the kids' houses. And so the house can be a little space where you can add all of your school projects and your dream achievements and stuff. So it becomes a little like view into visiting somebody else's house and seeing like, oh, you got this thing, that's so cool, and creating sort of social moments around that.
Are there things that you could do, kind of like Inception, where there's one person who's kind of like hosting the dream in a way? Are there things that you can do to that character to influence the world as a whole? Like how you, like in Inception, when you dunk somebody in water, then like the whole house would flood,
A game that kids will play. I shouldn't say that. I have no idea what kids do now. But a game that I would play sometimes as a kid is when we were in a group, we would have a secret password, right, or a secret phrase, and it was usually just something so that when somebody else said it, we said it secretly means farts or whatever. So everybody would get a good chuckle. But what if there was a way to each kid, each person essentially gets to pick a little like pre-programmed, almost imagine, like a fill in the variable set of sequences. And it's like, if a member of your team does that, they're going to wake up from the dream. And so you find yourself, but it's not like you don't have a choice of making it really obscure. So instead you find yourself programming things and like, you either have to communicate to people that they shouldn't be doing it, and then it's kind of like a fun group handicap, or you don't say anything and then people suddenly are like sucked out of your dream combat, and then you have to be like, oh no, you didn't jump twice and then like spin around and shoot.
That's all the time that we have there. Let's close it down and come up with a name. I feel like we have used imagination before, right? Like to describe a nation of imaginary things.
We have Imaginational Monster Fighter.
That's right. Imaginational. That's what we did.
Imaginational. Imagination is not found.
Okay. Well, we do have Imaginational, but we can potentially use the same joke twice.
Yeah, what else? What would you call a bunch of kids like running around in a classroom? It's not like a throng.
Hooligans.
Hooligans. I wonder if there's like a play on Destiny or like Guardians. Oh, Hooligans is Guardians. That's kind of interesting.
Hooligans is Guardians. Is that
like the way that
proposing?
Destiny players are called Guardians?
Oh,
now
okay.
these are Hooligans.
Okay.
And Hooligans are in the hooliganation.
I mean, it's an interesting series of syllables and sounds.
What if you just called it? I don't think we've done anything like this. What if you just called it Sleepover?
Sleepover. I like that. I think that has a nice ring to it. It's
and then you make,
time of your life.
Don't make it the horror movie cover. Make it like, three kids in pajamas with a pillow fight happening or something in the background.
Okay. All right. Sleepover. That will be our community pitch for the day, coming from Andreas Lennartsson. Thank you very much for being so patient with that one. I see we've got another one from you that we can read out very soon as well. So if you would like to get in touch with us and submit your own game idea, have it potentially ignored for half a year, then you can do so by going to playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can email us playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. And we're into 2020, so go kick off the year by becoming a contributor to the Kane and Rance Patreon. What a great way of saying 2020, I got that raise I was looking for. I think I've got $1 or $2 that I can give to my favorite podcast community this year. So something to think about. And honestly, I'm going through this list and we have a lot more 6-month-old pitches to get through. So
that is true. So
we'll
keep them coming, We'll
keep
get around
them
to
coming
them eventually.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign, right? That we asked people to write in and we were able to get so many different things. And now we're down to, what do we get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get about 7 or 8 left. So if you do start writing in.
Still, yeah.
Yeah, if you do start writing in, the chances of your thing being read in 2020 are, I would say, pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right, Q, why don't you take us out of the show with a miniature pitch today?
Okay, so my miniature pitch is a AR sort of mobile experience where you actually take a set of little figures that are weapons, swords, shields, all that sort of stuff, and you can hang them up and display them on your wall. But also, as you're playing a mobile game, you can tap them like NFC tags and get those items in your game.
All right. That is going to be difficult to retail, but we can work through those challenges later.
Yeah, we'll talk to Ubisoft about it. I'm sure they'll take a chance on a game's Toys to Life thing these days, won't they?
Starlink worked pretty well for them, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know what? True story. Starlink was $10 with the entire Star Fox kit at Best Buy. I felt so bad. I was like, it's worth the price of the R-Wing alone.
I know. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we'll catch you next week.
Bye.